It was supposed to be just another quiet afternoon for a retired veteran who had parked his beloved car, his pride and joy, outside a local diner. But what happened next would leave him in shock and disbelief. A group of bikers, loud and arrogant, rolled into the parking lot and decided they had a score to settle, though no one knew why. Without warning, they took their frustrations out on the veteran's car, leaving deep scratches, shattered windows, and a scene of chaos. The veteran, a man who had served his country with honor, stood frozen, watching the destruction unfold. But what these bikers didn't know was that their actions were about to set off a chain of events they'd never see coming. Justice has a way of finding those who think they're untouchable, and this time it was about to strike back in the most unexpected way. The veteran, a man in his late 60s named Joe, had seen his fair share of battles during his years in the military, but nothing could have prepared him for this. That car wasn't just a vehicle, it was a symbol of everything he'd worked hard for after returning home. It had been a gift to himself after years of sacrifice, a piece of normalcy he cherished. As Joe stood there in stunned silence, the bikers roared with laughter, their arrogance on full display. What could have driven them to do such a thing? Joe didn't recognize any of their faces, but it was clear they felt untouchable. The other diners watched from inside, too nervous to intervene, and Joe didn't want to provoke a confrontation. But little did those bikers know there were witnesses beyond the human eye. A surveillance camera perched nearby had captured everything. Justice was already in motion. Joe spent the rest of the afternoon replaying the scene in his mind, trying to make sense of the senseless. Why target him? He hadn't spoken to the bikers or even looked their way before the incident. The damage to his car was extensive, but the blow to his dignity stung even more. Meanwhile, word of the incident spread quickly through the small town. The diner staff, who had always admired Joe's quiet kindness, couldn't shake the sight of him standing there, helpless. Unbeknownst to Joe, one of the staff members, a young man named Eric, had taken an interest in the situation. Eric had seen the bikers before, regulars at a bar a few miles away. They were known for stirring trouble, but this time they'd gone too far. As Eric watched the surveillance footage, he felt his anger rise. He knew he couldn't let this slide. Justice wasn't just about doing what was right. It was about standing up for someone who had given so much for others. But going against the bikers was a risk, and Eric needed to plan carefully. Time was ticking, and the tension was only growing. Eric couldn't shake the image of Joe's devastated face from his mind. Determined to act, he reached out to a few trusted friends, including Sarah, a tech-savvy local who could analyze the surveillance footage, and Marcus, an off-duty officer who often stopped by the diner. Together, they pieced together the timeline and identified the bikers. The license plates on their motorcycles were clearly visible in the footage, giving Marcus enough information to dig deeper. As they worked quietly behind the scenes, Joe remained unaware of their efforts. He spent his days trying to repair his car, though some of the damage was beyond fixing. Each scratch and dent reminded him of the injustice, but he chose not to dwell on anger. Meanwhile, the bikers continued their routine, completely unaware that the walls were closing in on them. Tension reached a boiling point when Eric received a tip. The bikers were planning a meetup that weekend, a gathering that would bring them all together in one spot. It was the perfect opportunity to confront them, but the stakes couldn't have been higher. Eric and his team were ready to make their move, but questions lingered in the air. Would justice prevail, or would the bikers' reign of arrogance continue unchecked? As the weekend approached, Eric and his team finalized their plan. The idea was simple: gather enough evidence to ensure the bikers couldn't talk their way out of trouble. Marcus had called in a favor with a fellow officer who agreed to monitor the meetup discreetly, ready to step in when the time was right. The team was confident, but just as they thought everything was falling into place, an unexpected twist threw their plans into chaos. Late Friday night, Joe received an anonymous note slipped under his door. The message was brief but chilling. Asterisk, stay quiet, old man, or next time it won't just be your car. Asterisk, Joe's heart sank as he read the words, realizing the bikers must have found out someone was digging into their actions. This wasn't just about a car anymore. This was personal. When Eric learned about the note, his determination only deepened. But it also meant they had to act fast. The bikers weren't just reckless. They were willing to intimidate to keep their power. As the meetup drew closer, tension hung heavy in the air. What started as an act of vandalism had spiraled into something far more dangerous, and the clock was ticking for Eric, Joe, and the team to make their move. The night of the bikers' meetup arrived, and Eric, Marcus, and Sarah were in position. Marcus had called for backup, ensuring officers were stationed nearby, ready to act at a moment's notice. Eric, armed with a hidden camera, blended into the crowd at the biker bar. The atmosphere was rowdy, the bikers laughing and boasting loudly, as if they were untouchable. But Eric wasn't there for confrontation. He needed one final piece of evidence to tie them to the vandalism and the threats against Joe. As Eric discreetly recorded their conversations, he overheard something unexpected. The leader of the group was bragging about not just the damage to Joe's car, but a string of similar incidents in other towns. It was clear this wasn't an isolated act, it was a pattern. Eric signaled to Marcus, who alerted the officers. Just as the police prepared to move in, chaos erupted. One of the bikers spotted Eric and realized he wasn't part of their usual crowd. The room fell silent as the leader confronted him, but before things could escalate, sirens blared and officers stormed in. The bikers scattered, but there was nowhere to run. Within minutes, the ringleaders were in custody, and the surveillance footage, combined with their own careless boasting, sealed their fate. As the dust settled, Joe received an unexpected surprise. Among the evidence recovered from the bikers was a stash of cash they'd stolen in another crime spree. The authorities used it to cover the cost of repairing Joe's car. But the real twist came later. One of the bikers confessed that their actions weren't random. They targeted Joe because of a long-forgotten grudge from years ago, one Joe had no idea it even existed. In the end, justice was served, but the experience reminded everyone in town of the importance of standing together. Eric's courage, Marcus's diligence, and the community's quiet strength ensured that no one, not even a group of entitled bikers, was above accountability. In the days that followed, the town rallied around Joe, showing their gratitude for his service and their support after everything he had endured. The repairs to his car were completed quickly, but what touched Joe the most was the kindness from his neighbors. Small gestures like a home-cooked meal or simply stopping by to check on him. Eric became something of a local hero, though he brushed off the praise, insisting he had just done what anyone would do. The experience taught him the value of standing up for what's right, even when it feels daunting. For Joe, the ordeal served as a reminder that while there's no shortage of wrongdoing in the world, there's also no shortage of good people willing to step up. As life in the town returned to normal, the bikers faced justice, and Joe's sense of peace was restored. And with his car gleaming like new, he took it out for a quiet drive, grateful to live in a community that had his back.